When my sister stole my scholarship, it felt like the air was knocked out of me. I had worked every single night until sunrise, holding on to the hope that this opportunity would finally pull me out of the small town that always made me feel invisible. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, and when the letter came with my name on it, she made sure it never reached me. I found out weeks later when she bragged to everyone about being chosen, her smile shining like it was earned. My parents celebrated her, and I stood there clapping, pretending not to notice the sting in my chest. But what she didn't know was that life has a way of circling back, and no matter how many times she tried to take what was mine, she couldn't steal my future. Have you ever been betrayed by your own blood? I grew up in a house where love had conditions and achievements were currency. My parents weren't cruel, but they were selective in their pride. My sister, Claire, was the kind of daughter every parent wanted to show off, the one who knew how to smile at the right time, charm every guest, and twist any situation into her favor. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background doing the real work while she soaked up the praise. From the time we were little, it was clear that her word carried more weight than mine, no matter how many times I proved myself. I used to think it was because she was older, that maybe they trusted her more because she had experience. But as I grew up, I realized it was something else entirely. She knew how to make people believe in her lies, while I relied on truth. The scholarship I'd been working toward since freshman year was my ticket out, the one thing that didn't depend on anyone's opinion of me. I spent years building that dream, juggling school, part-time jobs, and tutoring sessions. I turned down parties, skipped weekends, and buried myself in textbooks, while Claire floated through life without effort. She had already failed 2 semesters in college, but somehow she managed to make excuses that my parents swallowed whole. I remember the night I submitted my final essay for the scholarship committee, my hands trembling as I hit send. It felt like everything I'd ever done led to that moment. Weeks later, when the envelope came, I wasn't home. I was at my job at the library, stacking books and humming under my breath, imagining how it would feel to finally hold my future in my hands. Claire was the one who found it first. I didn't know until later, of course. She saw my name on the letterhead, saw the logo of the university I'd dreamed of, attending since I was 14, and made a decision in that moment that would change everything. When I came home that night, she was sitting on the couch pretending to scroll through her phone. I asked if any mail had come, and she shook her head without looking up. There was a flicker in her expression I couldn't read then, a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. A few days passed, and I started to worry. My classmates had started posting online about their acceptance letters, and mine hadn't arrived. I checked the mailbox 3 times a day, even called the postal office once. My mum told me to be patient, that maybe the committee hadn't made final decisions yet. But then, 2 weeks later, Claire posted a picture online standing next to my parents with a letter in her hand, the same university crest glowing in the sunlight. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. Can't wait to start this new chapter." I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling my stomach drop at first. I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe she applied too. Maybe she got lucky. But deep down, I knew. When I confronted her, she didn't even flinch. She smiled and said, "You should have checked your email faster." It made no sense until I found the truth. She had used my login information, the same one she begged for months ago, saying she needed to print something from my laptop, and she had taken my essay, my transcripts, my recommendation letters. She changed the name, altered the contact information, and submitted it as her own. When the acceptance letter arrived, she intercepted it. She even managed to convince my parents that she had earned it, saying I was being dramatic when I tried to explain. My mum told me not to ruin the moment for her sister. My dad said there would be other chances for me. That night, I cried until my throat hurt, not just because I lost the scholarship, but because I realized my family had chosen to believe her over me again. I had no proof, just my word against hers. Claire left for the university a month later, taking my dream with her. leaving me behind to pick up the pieces. I wanted to hate her, but what I felt was worse: emptiness. For a while, I drifted. I took a job at the diner down the street, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and hopeless dreams. I worked 12-hour shifts, saved every dollar, and enrolled in community college because I refused to stop learning. I used to watch her social media updates late at night, photos of her with new friends, parties, and captions about how proud she was of herself. Each post felt like a knife twisting deeper, but it also fueled something in me, a quiet, simmering determination. I knew I couldn't get back what she stole, but I could build something better. My professor at community college noticed how seriously I took my studies. She saw the fire in me that even I didn't fully recognize yet. One afternoon, she called me into her office and asked about my plans. I told her everything. From the scholarship to the betrayal, she listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she said, "Sometimes, life reroutes you to test your strength. Don't waste it proving her wrong. Prove yourself right." That sentence stuck with me. I started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helped low-income students with college prep. I taught them how to write essays, organize applications, and apply for scholarships. Ironically, I became the person I had once needed. Word spread quickly, and soon more students started coming. The nonprofit offered me a small stipend, and eventually, I was promoted to coordinator. My life started to take shape again. The small, broken version of me that cried over that stolen letter began to fade. 2 years later, the organization partnered with several universities, including the very one my sister attended. I didn't realize it at first, but fate had brought me right back into her orbit. I was chosen to lead a mentorship event there, to speak about academic integrity and perseverance. When I stepped onto that campus for the first time, it felt surreal. Everything I had imagined years ago came rushing back. The stone buildings, the smell of rain on the old pathways, the sound of students laughing between classes. And then I saw her. Claire was sitting on a bench, staring at her phone, her hair shorter now. Her confidence cracked. She didn't see me at first, and for a moment, I just watched her. She looked tired, older somehow, like the shine she once had was gone. I found out later that she was barely hanging on, failing classes, skipping lectures, and losing her scholarship. She had built her success on lies, and it was finally collapsing. Meanwhile, I was there on merit, invited for my work, recognized for what I had built from nothing. Life has a strange way of restoring balance, even if it takes time. As I stood there preparing to speak, I felt no anger, only clarity. The girl who once believed her worth was defined by what others stole had finally become untouchable. Claire had taken my scholarship, but she couldn't steal the one thing she never understood: resilience. When I left that university, after the mentorship event, I thought that was the end of it. I had seen Claire's downfall, and part of me believed life had already settled the score. But fate wasn't finished weaving its threads. A few weeks later, I received an email from the university administration thanking me for my speech and offering me a full ride to complete my degree there through a new partnership program. They wanted me to study while continuing to mentor other students, combining both paths I had fought so hard to keep alive. I remember staring at the screen, frozen, unable to breathe for a moment. It was the same dream that had once been stolen, now returned in a way that felt even more personal. When I accepted, I didn't tell anyone right away. I wanted to walk onto that campus as my own person, not as Claire's shadow. The first day of classes was surreal. Everything that had once felt unreachable was suddenly mine to touch, and I was determined to leave my mark. My professors admired my work ethic, my classmates respected my voice, and I finally felt like I belonged somewhere without having to prove it to anyone. But life has a strange way of circling back to old wounds. One afternoon, while I was studying in the library, I heard a familiar voice whisper my name. I looked up, and there she was again, Claire. She looked thinner, her eyes hollow, her once perfect posture slouched like the weight of the world was pressing on her shoulders. I hadn't expected to see her again so soon. She hesitated before sitting across from me, her hands trembling slightly. She told me she'd dropped out after losing her scholarship, but decided to return under financial aid. She said she wanted to start over, to make things right. To be someone she could be proud of. I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't something you rebuild with words. Still, I nodded and told her that if she really wanted to change, she needed to do it for herself, not for forgiveness. From then on, we saw each other on campus often, not as sisters who shared a childhood, but as strangers crossing paths she'd sometimes wave. I'd nod politely. There were moments when I saw glimpses of the sister I once loved, the one who made me laugh before everything turned dark. But they faded quickly whenever I remembered the letter, the lies, the years lost. Yet, as much as I wanted to keep my distance, life kept pulling us together. During my second semester, a massive plagiarism scandal broke across the campus. Several students were accused of using old essays from online databases, and among the names was Claire's. I shouldn't have cared, but hearing it still hurt. She had promised she was changing, and now it looked like history repeating itself. The university called me in as a witness, since one of the essays in question had originated from my non-profit's training materials. I sat in the dean's office, heart pounding, as they asked me to confirm if I recognized the work. I did. It was a sample essay I'd written years ago as a guide for underprivileged students. Claire had taken it, edited it slightly, and submitted it as her own again. I left the office in silence, my chest tight with disappointment. Later that night, she showed up at my dorm crying. She begged me not to say anything, said she couldn't handle being expelled, said she didn't mean for it to happen, that she was desperate. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and for a second, I saw the scared little girl she used to be. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't let her drag me back into her chaos. "You keep doing this to yourself," I said quietly. "You steal things that were never meant for you, and you think they'll fill whatever hole you're trying to cover. But they never do they?" She looked at me like I'd struck her, then whispered, "You've always had everything, and I've always had to take." That broke me in a way I didn't expect, because she was wrong. I never had everything. I had to earn every inch of my life, while she was handed shortcuts. But I also realized in that moment that she wasn't just jealous of my success, she was jealous of my peace. The next morning, the investigation concluded, and she was officially expelled. It was over again. But this time, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt numb. The cycle was exhausting. The more she tried to destroy herself, the more I realized I couldn't fix her. I poured everything I had into my studies, my organization, and my students. I graduated 2 years later with honors, and the university offered me a full-time role as an academic advisor. I accepted it, knowing how deeply I believed in giving others the chances I once had to fight for. My parents attended the ceremony, pride and guilt mingled in their faces. Claire didn't come. No one knew where she had gone. For a long time, that silence haunted me. Sometimes I'd see someone with her hair in a crowd and feel my heart lurch. Other times I'd catch myself wondering if she was okay, if she'd ever learned to stop running from herself. Then one rainy evening, as I was leaving work, I found an envelope on my office desk with no return address. Inside was a letter in her handwriting. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but it said everything. "I'm sorry. I know I can't undo what I did. I took your chance because I thought it would make me matter. But you were right. What's meant for someone can't be stolen forever. I'm trying to start over really this time. Thank you for being stronger than me." I read those words over and over until they blurred through tears. That night, for the first time in years, I felt a sense of closure that didn't come from justice or revenge, but from understanding. I realized that my story wasn't just about being wronged, it was about rising without bitterness. Life had tested me through betrayal, but it had also shown me how powerful grace can be. Over the next few years, I kept building my career. My non-profit expanded nationally, helping thousands of students find scholarships honestly, guiding them toward paths that couldn't be taken from them. I was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and foundations. People saw my success and called it inspiring, but deep down, I knew it was built on scars. Every time I stood on a stage, I thought of that night crying in my childhood room and how that pain had shaped me into someone who refused to give up. A decade later, I was invited back to my hometown for an award ceremony honoring educators and community leaders. My parents attended again, beaming as I walked to the podium. As I began my speech, I looked around the room and my breath caught. In the far corner, sitting quietly with her hands folded in her lap, was Claire, older, humbler, but alive, whole. When our eyes met, she smiled. Not the smug, polished grin from years ago, but a small, genuine one that said she'd finally found her peace too. I smiled back. After the event, she approached me, holding a small box. Inside was a tarnished silver pen, the one I used to write my original scholarship essay. She said she found it years ago while packing to move and kept it as a reminder of what she'd done. "You should have it back," she said softly. "You earned everything I tried to steal." I took it, my fingers brushing hers, and in that moment, there was no anger left between us, just two sisters standing in the quiet truth of everything we'd survived. When she walked away, I didn't stop her. I didn't need to, because I finally understood that my story was never really about her. It was about me, about losing, rebuilding, and becoming someone who didn't need revenge to win. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real victory. The real turning point in my story didn't come with a loud moment of victory, but in quiet waves that settled slowly, the kind that force you to face what's been buried for years. After that article was published, people began reaching out from everywhere. Students who'd lost hope, parents who wanted guidance for their kids, even teachers who admitted they'd looked the other way too often. My inbox filled with stories that mirrored pieces of my own, and each one reminded me how far I'd come from that girl who once believed her future had been stolen. I was invited to speak on television, at conferences, and in schools across the country. Each time, I told the same truth, that you can rebuild after betrayal, that you don't need to fight to prove you were right, that time and perseverance speak louder than revenge ever could. The world saw strength, but what they didn't see was how long it took to heal. How many nights I spent doubting myself, wondering if I'd ever stop defining my worth by what was taken from me. Then one evening, at an event hosted by a national education board, I was presented with an award for outstanding contribution to academic reform. The room erupted in applause as I walked on stage, but my eyes caught on one face near the back. Claire, she was standing by the door, her expression unreadable, her hands clasped together. For a moment, everything else faded. I didn't expect her to be there. Didn't even know she'd found her way back into that world. After the ceremony, she waited for me outside. The night was cold, the air heavy with that soft hum cities get after dark. She said she'd read every interview, watched every speech, and that she finally understood the difference between us. She said she'd spent years trying to chase approval, while I'd learned to earn it. I listened quietly, my heart calm, not bitter. She told me she'd been volunteering at a youth center, teaching teenagers how to apply for scholarships and stay in school, and that she'd been using my non-profit's guides to do it. The irony of it all hit me, but it didn't sting, it humbled me. For years, I had thought my story was about reclaiming what she took. Now, standing there under the city lights, I realized it was about transforming it. I told her I was proud of her, not because she had changed everything, but because she had finally stopped running from herself. She started crying, quietly at first, then with that kind of release that only comes when guilt finally lets go. I didn't say much else. I didn't need to. We stood there for a while, two sisters who had once been enemies in silence, now just two people trying to forgive life for what it had done to us. When we parted, she said something that stayed with me forever. You were always stronger, not because you won, but because you never had to steal to become someone. After that night, something inside me settled. I stopped checking the rearview mirror of my past, stopped wondering what might have happened if things had gone differently. I had built something bigger than a scholarship, bigger than the pain. It was a life made from the rubble of everything that tried to bury me. And as for Claire, I never saw her often after that. But sometimes, I'd get updates through friends or messages she sent on holidays. She found her footing. Slowly, quietly. She never tried to take shortcuts again. There was something beautiful about that. The idea that even the person who caused you the most pain can still find redemption if you let go of the anger that keeps them trapped. Years later, I visited our old house. The neighborhood felt smaller, the walls thinner, the memories gentler. My parents were older, softer. My mother hugged me longer than usual, and my father's voice cracked when he said he was proud. In their eyes, I saw the unspoken regret for all the times they didn't believe me, but I didn't bring it up. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't need an audience. It just needs peace. Before leaving, I walked past the old mailbox, the same one where my letter had once disappeared, and smiled. That stolen scholarship had once felt like the end of my world, but now it felt like the beginning of everything that truly mattered. I realized the real climax of my story wasn't revenge or recognition. It was growth. Because somewhere between losing everything and rebuilding from nothing, I found the kind of strength no award or apology could ever match. And maybe that's what victory really is. Not the moment when the world claps for you, but the quiet realization that you've already won the moment you refuse to break. Years later, when people tell my story, they talk about the scholarship, the betrayal, and how I turned it into something powerful. But what they never see are the quiet moments in between. The years that shaped me after the storm passed, life became steady, and that steadiness felt like the greatest gift of all. I kept running my non-profit, now larger than I ever dreamed, helping students across the country find opportunities without falling into the traps I once did. Every time a student sent a letter saying they'd been accepted, I felt a small pulse of joy, like my younger self was being healed piece by piece. Sometimes I thought about Claire, not with anger or sadness, but with a kind of soft acceptance that only time can teach. She had written me another letter once, saying she had started her own small mentorship program for girls who struggled with confidence, and she credited me for inspiring her to believe she could still do good. I never replied, but I framed that letter on my office wall as a reminder that pain, when faced, can still lead to something meaningful. My parents grew old, seeing the kind of women we had become. Two very different paths born from the same childhood. There was a time when I would have wanted them to apologize, to admit how deeply they had failed me. But as the years passed, I realized I didn't need that anymore. Forgiveness wasn't about waiting for someone else to take responsibility. It was about freeing myself from carrying the weight of what they did. One evening, as the sun set through the windows of my office, I sat alone, holding that old silver pen Claire had returned to me. The ink had dried long ago, but the memories it carried still felt alive. It was the same pen I had used to write the essay that started everything. The essay that changed both our lives in different ways. I smiled, realizing how something so small had held the power to destroy and rebuild me all at once. I had once believed success was about proving people wrong, but now I understood it was about proving myself right, about becoming someone my younger self would look at and say, "We made it." My story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and that was enough. When I left the office that night, I didn't feel like the girl whose sister stole her scholarship anymore. I felt like the woman who turned betrayal into purpose, who learned that the best revenge isn't payback or pride, it's peace. And as I walked into the fading light, I whispered to myself the truth that had taken me years to learn. No one can steal what's meant for you, not even the people you love, because the future isn't something that's given, it's something you build, one hard-earned step at a time.